The sprawling lawn of the Blackwood family estate stretched endlessly under the July sun, dotted with white tents where my relatives displayed their success like trophies at a country fair. I sat at the furthest table from the main pavilion, nursing a glass of iced tea while my family held court around the pool, their voices carrying across the manicured gardens with practiced superiority. "Daniel's practice is booming," Aunt Catherine announced loudly, her hand resting proudly on my cousin's shoulder. "3 new partners this year, and they're opening a second office in Manhattan." Daniel preened in his custom-tailored suit, his Harvard Law pin catching the sunlight. "Corporate litigation is incredibly lucrative right now. We're billing clients at $800 an hour." The assembled relatives murmured appreciatively, their attention focused on the golden children who'd made the family name prestigious in legal and medical circles. I remained invisible in my simple khakis and button-down shirt, exactly as I preferred. "And Jennifer just performed her first solo heart surgery," Uncle Richard added, gesturing toward my surgeon cousin. "Johns Hopkins is already discussing department head positions." Jennifer smiled modestly while displaying her Rolex, a gift she mentioned from grateful patients. At 34 she'd achieved everything my family valued: prestigious education, impressive salary, and social standing that opened exclusive doors. Meanwhile, Uncle Richard continued with poorly concealed disappointment, "Michael here is stuck in some dead-end government position. Still living in that tiny DC apartment after 8 years." The criticism wasn't new. For nearly a decade I'd endured family gatherings where my basic administrative work was contrasted unfavorably with my cousin's flashy achievements. They had no idea that my Georgetown townhouse was paid in full or that my security clearance level was higher than most cabinet members. "What exactly do you do again, Michael?" Cousin Patricia asked with feigned interest. Her pharmaceutical company had just gone public, making her worth $50 million on paper. "Something with paperwork?" "Policy analysis," I replied quietly, the same vague answer I'd given for years. It was technically accurate. Analyzing whether to authorize drone strikes against terrorist targets definitely qualified as policy analysis. "Policy analysis," Uncle Richard repeated with distaste. "Sounds like shuffling papers in some basement office. No wonder you can't afford a decent car." My Honda Civic was parked among their BMWs and Mercedes, drawing subtle mockery all afternoon. They couldn't know that I chose modest transportation deliberately. Bulletproof sedans with government plates tended to raise questions at family barbecues. "The Blackwood Trust Fund distribution is next month," Grandfather announced from his wheelchair, his voice still commanding despite his 92 years. $25 million allocated based on professional achievement and family contribution. Daniel and Jennifer exchanged confident glances. The trust fund had been their anticipated reward for years. Validation that their prestigious careers deserved financial recognition from our family's accumulated wealth. "I've been reviewing the criteria," Grandfather continued, consulting notes prepared by his estate attorney. "Educational excellence, professional recognition, community impact, and ethical standing." Aunt Catherine smiled knowingly. "Daniel's been featured in Legal Times 3 times this year. And Jennifer's cardiac research was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. While Michael files government paperwork for $40,000 a year," Uncle Richard added with cruel satisfaction. Hardly the achievement level Grandfather intended to reward. The assumption about my salary was wildly inaccurate. My compensation package exceeded most Fortune 500 CEO salaries when classified bonuses were included, but correcting them would require explanations I couldn't provide. "I've been thinking Michael should consider a career change," Aunt Catherine suggested with maternal condescension. "Perhaps Daniel could find him a position at the law firm. Something entry-level to get him started." "I suppose I could arrange an interview," Daniel said magnanimously. "Though he'd need to start in document review. Not exactly partner track material but steady work." My phone vibrated against my leg, 3 short bursts followed by a longer pulse. The emergency signal reserved for classified communications requiring immediate response. I glanced discreetly at the screen. Urgent. POTUS requesting immediate briefing. National security matter developing. "Are you listening, Michael?" Uncle Richard's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. "We're trying to help you build a future." "I appreciate your concern," I said, checking my phone again as 2 more encrypted messages appeared from the National Security Council. My work is more complex than it appears. Jennifer laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Complex? Michael, you work for the government. How complex can filing reports and attending meetings really be? The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so exhausting. While Jennifer saved lives one patient at a time, I spent my days preventing terrorist attacks that could kill thousands. While Daniel fought legal battles for corporate clients, I helped coordinate military operations that protected American interests globally. My phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID made my pulse quicken. Secretary of State direct line. I looked up at my family, still debating the trust fund distribution and my professional inadequacy, completely unaware that history was about to interrupt their garden party. "Excuse me," I said, rising from my chair as the phone continued buzzing. "I need to take this call." "More government business on a Sunday?" Uncle Richard scoffed. "Let me guess. Someone needs help finding the correct tax form." I walked toward the house, answering just as I reached the French doors leading to the library. "Stephen's here." "Michael, thank God." Secretary Harrison's voice crackled with urgency. "We have a developing situation in the South China Sea. Chinese naval forces are moving against Taiwanese fishing vessels, and Beijing isn't responding to diplomatic channels." Through the library window, I could see my family continuing their discussion of my career limitations. Daniel was now explaining how government employees lacked real-world experience compared to private sector professionals. "What's the intelligence assessment?" I asked, already shifting into the mindset that had guided American foreign policy for the past 8 years. "Satellite imagery shows a full naval deployment, 12 destroyers for submarines and air support. This could be the precursor to an invasion attempt. The president needs your strategic analysis immediately." I glanced at my watch. "I can be at the White House in 40 minutes. "Negative. Air Force One is en route to your location. The president wants to consult with you before making any public statements. We're talking about potential military response, Michael. This could be the beginning of World War III. Air Force One. Coming here." To the Blackwood family estate in rural Virginia, where my relatives were discussing trust fund distributions and my professional failures. "Sir, perhaps we could meet at Camp David instead? My family doesn't know the nature of my work." "No time. Chinese forces are moving faster than anticipated. We need your assessment of Xi Jinping's psychological profile and probable response patterns to various intervention scenarios." Through the window, I watched cousin Patricia explaining to the assembled relatives how her pharmaceutical company's success demonstrated real achievement compared to government desk jobs that anyone could perform. "Understood, sir. How long until arrival?" 12 minutes. Marine One is also inbound with the Joint Chiefs. "Michael, the President specifically requested you as lead advisor on this situation. Your expertise on Chinese military doctrine is irreplaceable." The call ended, leaving me staring at my phone in the sudden silence of the library. In 12 minutes, the most powerful man on earth would be landing on my grandfather's estate lawn, seeking my counsel on decisions that could reshape global history. I walked back outside to find the conversation had shifted to my romantic life. "Still single at 31, Aunt Catherine was saying with theatrical pity. "I suppose it's hard to find quality women when you're stuck in middle management." "Government workers don't exactly move in successful circles," Jennifer added helpfully. "Maybe if Michael upgraded his career prospects, he'd meet someone appropriate." Daniel nodded sagely. "Professional achievement attracts professional achievement. Success breeds success. It's basic social dynamics." I resumed my seat, noting the distant sound of helicopters approaching from the east. My family's chatter about my inadequacies continued, oblivious to the fact that their unsuccessful relative was about to become the most important person at their garden party. "The trust fund should really go to family members who've demonstrated exceptional achievement," Uncle Richard declared with finality. "Daniel's law practice, Jennifer's medical career. These are the kinds of accomplishments grandfather intended to reward." While Michael files paperwork, Patricia added with cruel satisfaction. "Hardly the same caliber of contribution." The helicopter sound was growing louder now, but my family remained absorbed in their criticism. I could see the confusion beginning to dawn on a few faces as the noise became impossible to ignore. What is that sound? Aunt Catherine asked, shading her eyes to peer at the sky. Probably just military exercises, Daniel said dismissively. They use this airspace sometimes for training. The irony was perfect. Military exercises, led by the man whose strategic advice had shaped American military policy for the better part of a decade. My secure phone rang again, this time displaying White House Situation Room on the caller ID. Stevens, I answered. Michael, this is General Morrison. We're 30 seconds out from landing. Are you prepared for immediate briefing? Affirmative, sir. Uncle Richard was staring at me with growing suspicion. Michael, what kind of government work requires calls from generals? Before I could answer, 3 massive helicopters appeared over the tree line, their rotor wash sending napkins and party decorations flying across the lawn as they descended toward the estate's central lawn. The lead helicopter touched down first, its distinctive blue and white paint scheme unmistakable to anyone who followed American politics. Marine One, the presidential helicopter, landing on my grandfather's lawn while my family stood frozen in shocked silence. Is that? Jennifer's voice trailed off as uniformed Marines emerged from the aircraft, establishing a security perimeter with practiced efficiency. The second helicopter disgorged the Joint Chiefs of Staff in full dress uniforms, their bearings suggesting the gravity of whatever crisis had brought them to rural Virginia on a Sunday afternoon. The third helicopter carried additional security personnel and communication equipment that they began setting up with military precision. Michael, Uncle Richard's voice was barely a whisper. What exactly do you do for the government? Before I could answer, the door of Marine One opened and President Morrison stepped onto the lawn, flanked by Secret Service agents who immediately began scanning the assembled family members with professional suspicion. There he is, the president said, striding directly toward me with the confident walk that had carried him through 2 successful election campaigns. Michael, we need to discuss Chinese naval deployment patterns and your assessment of Xi Jinping's psychological profile. My family stood like statues as the most powerful man in the world shook my hand with obvious familiarity. Mr. President, I replied formally. The South China Sea situation? Escalating rapidly. Your expertise on Chinese military doctrine is the key to our response strategy. He gestured toward Marine One. Shall we discuss this aboard Air Force One? We have secure communications established. Actually, sir, if I could have just a moment to address my family? They're somewhat surprised by your arrival. President Morrison glanced at my relatives, taking in their expensive clothes and stunned expressions. Of course, family time is important. He raised his voice to address them directly. I hope you all realize what an exceptional man you have in Michael Stevens. His strategic intelligence has prevented 3 major international conflicts in the past 2 years alone. Daniel's mouth was hanging open. Patricia looked like she was trying to solve a complex equation in her head. Michael serves as my senior advisor for strategic intelligence, the president continued, apparently enjoying their shock. His security clearance is higher than my own cabinet members. The Chinese specifically request him by name for all major diplomatic negotiations. General Morrison approached with a tablet displaying satellite imagery. Sir, the Chinese fleet is now 12 miles from Taiwanese waters. We need Mr. Stevens' assessment immediately. I turned to my family, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror as they processed the implications of what they were witnessing. About that dead-end government position, I said quietly. I analyze global threats and advise the president on matters of national security. My paperwork includes briefings that shape American foreign policy. Uncle Richard was staring at the presidential helicopter like it might disappear if he blinked. The trust fund investigation, I continued, should be complete by tomorrow. Treasury discovered some interesting irregularities in the pharmaceutical investments. Daniel, your law firm's offshore accounts are particularly fascinating. Patricia went white. What investigation? The one I requested when I noticed suspicious financial patterns indicating possible money laundering through family assets. Apparently, some relatives have been using trust fund money to inflate their professional success. President Morrison checked his watch. Michael, the Chinese situation is deteriorating. We need your strategic assessment now. Of course, sir. I looked at my family one final time. We'll discuss the trust fund distribution when I return from preventing World War III. 6 hours later, I returned from Air Force One to find the estate deserted except for my grandfather, who sat alone on the terrace overlooking the now empty lawn. The other relatives had fled once Treasury agents arrived with warrants for Daniel's arrest and seizure orders for Patricia's accounts. "Quite an afternoon," grandfather said calmly, gesturing to the chair beside him. 40 years of building this family's reputation, and it took one phone call to reveal what we really were. I settled into the chair, exhaustion weighing heavily after hours of crisis management. The Chinese situation had been defused through diplomatic channels, but the stress of preventing military confrontation always left me drained. "The trust fund money they stole," grandfather continued. "How much are we talking about?" 18 million over 5 years. Daniel's law firm was a front for money laundering operations. Patricia's pharmaceutical company existed primarily to justify massive financial transfers from family assets. Grandfather nodded sadly. "While you've been quietly saving the world and never asking for recognition. I don't need recognition. I need people to stop assuming government service means failure." "The 25 million trust fund distribution," grandfather said with a slight smile. "I believe it has found its rightful recipient." A gentle breeze rustled the trees where Marine One had landed, carrying the scent of summer roses and the fading exhaust from departed helicopters. Tomorrow my cousins would face federal charges while I returned to my dead-end government job that literally held the world together. Some careers, after all, matter more than family approval or family money.